You remember it perfectly. The room you grew up in. The exact words your friend said during that argument 3 years ago. The color of the car that almost hit you at the crossing. You would swear to it. You would describe it in detail, with total confidence, to anyone who asked. And there is a real chance that almost none of it actually happened the way you remember. Not because you were lying, not because your mind is broken, but because memory was never built to work the way you think it works. It was never a recording. It was never a video file sitting safely in storage, waiting to be replayed exactly as it was captured. What you call a memory is something far stranger and far less stable than that. In 1932, a British psychologist named Frederic Bartlett ran an experiment that quietly broke the way scientists understood memory. He read people a short Native American folktale called The War of the Ghosts, a story full of unfamiliar names, strange events, and a structure that did not match the storytelling conventions his British test subjects were used to. Then, days, weeks, and sometimes years later, he asked them to recall the story as accurately as they could. What he got back was not a faded copy of the original story. It was a quietly rewritten one. Confusing names were replaced with familiar ones. Unfamiliar plot elements were smoothed into something that made more sense to a Western mind. People did not just forget details. They unconsciously edited the story to fit what they already expected a story to sound like. Bartlett called this process Reconstruction. Your brain, he argued, does not store memories like files in a cabinet. It stores fragments, impressions, and emotional residue, and then rebuilds the full scene every single time you try to recall it, using whatever beliefs, expectations, and current mood happen to be active in that moment. You are not remembering the event. You are remembering your last reconstruction of the event and adding a fresh layer of editing on top. This idea sat quietly in psychology for decades, mostly theoretical, until a researcher came along and showed exactly how easy it is to manipulate. Her name is Elizabeth Loftus, and in 1974 she ran a study that should make you nervous about every confident memory you have ever defended in an argument. She showed participants footage of a car accident, then asked them questions about what they had seen. The trick was in the wording. One group was asked, how fast was the car going when it smashed into the other car? Another group was asked the exact same question, but with the word smashed replaced by hit. The participants who heard smashed reported significantly higher speed estimates, and when asked a week later whether they had seen broken glass at the scene, even though there was no broken glass in the footage at all, the smashed group was far more likely to falsely remember it. A single word, embedded in a single question, had reached backward in time and altered what people believed they had witnessed with their own eyes. If a word can do that, what can a story do? What can a leading conversation with a friend do, repeated over years, each time reshaping the memory a little further from what actually happened? Loftus did not stop there. In one of the most unsettling experiments in the history of psychology, conducted in the mid-1990s, she and her colleagues set out to find out whether it was possible to implant an entire memory that never happened at all. Researchers approached adult participants with short written narratives about their own childhood, supposedly provided by family members. 3 of the stories were real. One was completely fabricated, a memory of being lost in a shopping mall as a child, crying, eventually being rescued by an elderly stranger and reunited with the family. Roughly a quarter of participants did not just accept the fake story. They elaborated on it. They added sensory details. The color of the stranger's jacket, the specific smell of the food court, the exact wave of panic they remembered feeling. They were describing, in vivid first-person detail, something that had never happened to them, with the same confidence they used to describe memories that were completely real. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Confidence and accuracy are almost completely unrelated. The vividness of a memory tells you nothing reliable about whether it actually occurred the way you remember it. There is a particular category of memory that makes this even harder to accept because it feels like the strongest evidence against everything you have just heard. Psychologists call them flashbulb memories, the vivid, almost photographic recollections people have of huge, emotional public events. Where you were, who you were with, what you were doing the moment you heard the news. In 1986, cognitive psychologist Ulric Neisser took advantage of one of these moments almost immediately after it happened. The morning after the Challenger space shuttle disaster, he had a class of students write down, in detail, exactly how they had heard the news. 2.5 years later, he asked the same students to recall it again. The results were striking. Many students described their memory as just as vivid, just as confident, just as detailed the second time around. But when Neisser compared the two accounts, side by side, a significant number of them did not match at all. People were certain of details that were demonstrably, provably wrong, contradicted by their own handwriting from less than 24 hours after the event. One student even rated her second account as more accurate than the first, despite it being almost entirely different. The feeling of vividness had not faded. The accuracy had simply quietly disappeared underneath it. So here's the uncomfortable mechanism underneath all of this. Every time you recall a memory, you are not opening a sealed file. You are pulling something out, briefly exposing it to your current mood, your current beliefs, anything you have read or heard since, and then putting it back changed. Neuroscientists call this reconsolidation. Each retrieval is a small act of rewriting. The memory you have today is not the original event. It is a copy of a copy of a copy, edited a little more with every single recall, and you have no internal alarm that goes off to warn you when the editing has happened. This is not a flaw unique to a few unreliable people. It is how every human memory system works, including yours, including the memory you are most certain about right now, possibly including some detail in this very video that you will misremember slightly the next time you try to describe it to someone else. It explains something strange that happens online every few years, when thousands of people insist, with total sincerity, that a children's book series was always spelled Berenstain Bears instead of Berenstain Bears, or that a particular actor died in the 1980s when he is, in fact, still alive. Psychologists call this collective false memory the Mandela effect, after the mistaken belief many people shared that Nelson Mandela died in prison decades before his actual death. It is not a glitch in reality. It is thousands of individual brains, independently running the same reconstructive process and landing on the same plausible-sounding wrong answer because that is what brains evolved to do. Fill gaps with the most likely story, not the most accurate one. Think about what this means the next time you are absolutely certain you are right in an argument about something that happened years ago. The other person is not necessarily lying to you, and you are not necessarily lying to yourself. You are both confidently holding two different, independently reconstructed, equally sincere versions of an event that neither of you actually has perfect access to anymore. This is not a reason to distrust every memory you have or to live in constant doubt about your own past. Memory's reconstructive nature exists for a reason. A perfectly literal recording of every second of your life would be a useless, overwhelming archive. What your brain does instead is compress experience into meaning, into lessons, into a workable story you can act on. That flexibility is what lets you learn, adapt, and make sense of a life that is far too detailed to store frame by frame. But it does mean something worth sitting with. The version of your past you carry around is not a window looking backward in time. It is a story your brain keeps quietly rewriting, a little more each time you tell it, shaped as much by who you are today as by who you were back then. So go back to that memory you started with, the room, the argument, the car at the crossing. You still remember it perfectly. You just have no real way of knowing whether perfectly ever meant what you thought it meant. Subscribe for more videos that break down the hidden mechanics behind money, history, and human behavior. See you in the next one. Like, share, and subscribe.